And we're live. It is Friday, February 28th, my grandfather's birthday, which I thought as a child was as close as you could be to being born on leap day without being born on leap day. But my grandfather, being A, extremely bright, and B, very pedantic, explained to me that it was exactly as far from February 29th than it was possible to be, because he was born in a 2-year off leap year cycle. So he was not born one day from leap day. He was born 2 full years and 1 day. And so I have always remembered February 28th as the day that is the furthest from leap day, at least if you are um, uh, not on a leap year. It is the year of our Lord 2025, which is neither the year of a leap day nor the year of an off cycle. It's 1 year off. It is 8:00 a.m. in both the cabin in the woods and in the cactus's home state of wherever the cactus lives, and in Montreal. And the cactus has, in fact, rendered Holly to an undisclosed location, we presume to be either in Romania or Thailand, where she is being interrogated. And the sun is nonetheless shining. The birds are chirping. And
you're watching Dog Shirt TV, an effing revolution in morning television.
it is Dog Shirt TV.
And I'm back.
It is an effing revolution in morning television because, my friends, where else can you watch an introduction as frankly incomprehensible to those not in the know as this one? And I want to start today with the sacrifice that my older child, E.J. Wittes, made for you all yesterday. I mean, I wrote a column about Kash Patel, and then I called up EJ and said, why don't you listen to an episode or two of not Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, of the Dan Bongino show, and write up your thoughts about it. And he listened to 42 minutes and 49 seconds of the Dan Bongino show in order to bring you today's Dog Shirt Daily. And I'm just going to say, of such sacrifices, we don't have medals for that in the U.S. military, but these are the things that take tolls on people that, leave a lifetime of scars. So thank you to EJ. Thank you to the cactus for returning Holly to us. We've discovered she was wrongfully rendered to Thailand. And welcome to the estimable Eve Gaumond, who is now questioning her life choices for joining us this morning.
No, of course not. Of course not. I'm questioning EJ's choices. Well,
I don't know. It sounds like he does what he's told. So
EJ generally doesn't do what he's told, but I think this was, kind of like, holding an ice cube to see how long you could do it, or eating cinnamon. It was like, how much Dan Bongino can I actually listen to?
Yeah, but how long is an episode normally?
He said it was a 48-minute episode, and he only made it through 42 minutes. So I don't know if 48 minutes is the typical episode. I'm not a listener, I have to say. Or if the particular episode that EJ listened to was 48 minutes.
So I was, thinking yesterday that he really should keep the show going while he's in office. And I, because
why not?
We've had,
it's kind of Hugo Chavez
podcasters go in and out of government, but with the exception,
still selling his hats.
Yeah, with the exception of Ted Cruz, who runs a podcast while a senator, and Mike Johnson, I think, had a podcast. There were some congressmen, but executive branch officials usually are not podcasters while they're in office. And I think this is a norm that it's really time for it to go. I think, sort of like live from the Hoover building, it's the Dan Bongino show. I mean, it kind of
Maybe they could make an arrest of a liberal trader on live on the show.
exactly. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities for drama. Now, I do want to say, and I wrote my column about this yesterday, but I do want to say that I have a little bit of envy of Dan Bongino and a little bit of sort of sense of, hey, wait a minute, this isn't fair. Because, you know, if we're talking about the podcasters most qualified to be deputy director of the FBI, I mean, granted, I don't have law enforcement experience, and he was a Secret Service agent. And granted that the Lawfare podcast is merely the number one podcast in government right now on Apple Podcasts, whereas the Dan Bongino show is number 7 overall. And we're not competitive with the Dan Bongino show. And granted that Dog Shirt TV only has 23 live viewers right now. And I think if Dan Bongino were doing his show, it would probably have more than that. But I sort of feel like, as a bona fide member of the liberal elite, I should be the one who is the podcaster appointed to be deputy.
Oh, I thought you were going to say you should be the first one arrested live on his show.
Well, I mean, that would be second place.
I think that's the more likely outcome.
Yeah, but I kind of feel like if we're going to be appointing podcasters to senior national security positions, what am I, fucking chopped liver? Come on. It just feels wrong to skip over me to. I know we're going for the working class chic and the macho guys with big arms and tattoos and stuff. But look, I can get a tattoo. I've never done it, but
here's the question, Ben. Can you subvert the constitutional order?
yeah.
But would you?
No.
That's
I could pretend. I could cosplay, which is all that he's doing, really.
I don't know. I think they might actually subvert the constitutional order.
So here's my fear about these guys. I'm not against cosplay. People want to dress up as Wonder Woman and go to hotels and, be furries or whatever.
Oh my gosh, I'm listening to that podcast. Very good.
Isn't Fur and Loathing amazing? Yeah. That's Fur and Loathing by Goat Rodeo, and you guys got to listen to it. It's hilarious, and it's really weird, and it's kind of cool. But you want to be a furry? I'm totally down with you. You want to dress up as a superhero Marvel Cinematic Universe? Go for it. Okay, Kash Patel, in his first meeting with the FBI staff, proposed, apparently seriously, a partnership between the FBI and the UFC. Now, for those who are not in the Washington acronym world, the UFC is not part of that world. It is the ultimate fighting competition or challenge or whatever. And it is, the cage match people. And I just want to say, play, at least know your here.
Your mic is doing something weird, Ben. We can't hear you.
Ooh, can you not hear me?
Now
No,
you're
that's
good.
fine. It's just like the orientation of it.
Oh, okay. If you're going to cosplay as the FBI director, at least know you're cosplaying. I think neither of them really understands that the UFC is like a show on TV and it's a fighting league. It's not like what the FBI does.
Here's a question, and my husband actually told me the answer to this last night, but my brain function is such that I literally can't remember something he told me last night. Who owns UFC? Because
I don't
yeah,
know the name, but it's a friend of Trump's.
exactly. So it's not Linda McMahon because she is WWE.
Right. She is
So
WWE, and also is like, isn't she like a cabinet secretary now?
she is, but again, that is not an obstacle anymore to anything.
Right. Again,
So,
this is when you're cosplaying and don't even know it, right?
and also
You can't tell the
doing
difference
conflict.
between the UFC, which is a real fighting thing, but is not the FBI, and the WWE, which is fake fighting, and the FBI, which is actually not fighting at all. A lot of it is nerdy investigation stuff, but there is this little kicking down the door thing and arresting people aspect.
Yeah, so there's some whoever owns UFC, I'm sure would get a lucrative contract and, just add another log to the bonfire of conflicts of interest um, in the administration.
So, Ev, how is the Canadian Liberal election leadership fight shaping up?
Uh, the federal level, Mark Carney is rising, skyrocketing. It's going well for him. I think that the Polyev um, worries are kind of fading away. On the other and at the provincial level, Doug Ford, Captain Canada, but also Captain Right Wing.
Yeah, well, you got to explain who Doug Ford is because he had a big day yesterday.
Yeah, strong majority for him. He was elected as the premier of Ontario. He
And wait, is Doug Ford the crack smoking mayor of Toronto?
little bro or big bro brother. Crack smoking mayor of Toronto is dead now. But same kind of
Moral of the
vibe.
story, guys, don't smoke crack while you're being mayor. Being mayor is dangerous.
Yeah, I yeah. I there was probably a Mayor Adams joke to make, but I couldn't find it. So
Okay, so help us out. Doug Ford, kind of a Trumpy populist figure, but he's really popular in Ontario now because he's anti-Trump. So walk us through it.
I should know better. Actually, I don't exactly understand how he became Captain Canada or why he's so popular. Definitely, he profited like he the calling the election was an opportunistic move. I think that he was probably aiming to get a stronger mandate, which worked. He goes on TV with a cap, a blue cap, like Canada is not for sale. That's the kind. I honestly, you guys are turning us into stuff that I don't totally understand.
Oh, we don't understand it
Embrace it,
either, to be clear.
embrace it. Because we need the Canadians very feisty in order to fill the gap in world leadership. We need lots of feisty Canadians out there.
I guess that's not exactly in our DNA though, Fighty. I think that we should go back to our like era
No,
of
we need
blue
you feisty.
helmets. Yeah,
Yeah.
All
Get
right.
the get
So,
the Mounties plenty mad. Give
yeah,
them
on our
some machine
horses.
guns. Have them machine guns on the horses. Turn the horses into like a tank. Do armor on the horses. Do like a anyway, the Mounties clearly need like a makeover. They need to do some UFC
send the
workouts.
cactus to train them.
Yeah, the cactus can go up there.
So Ev, what does it so from a US perspective, the governor of, I don't know, I guess the equivalent of Ontario would be California, is an important position, but it's not like a, a, a critical thing. But
How do you equate Ontario to California?
It's the most populous. It's the biggest. Or not the physically the biggest, but it's the center of
The
economic.
largest. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, right.
Um, uh, but the Premier of Ontario is a bigger deal in Canadian politics than, say, Gavin Newsom is. And so what does it matter? What does it say about where Canada is that Doug Ford wins wins big yesterday as both a conservative and reminder to everybody who doesn't understand this, which I still don't, but the provincial parties are separate from the national parties. So to say that he's a conservative does not really mean that he's in the same party as Pierre Poilievre, who runs the National Conservative Party. But he's he's a conservative, but he's also running as a Canadian nationalist anti-Trump. What does it say about the mood in Canada, if anything, at the federal level?
He recently discovered that he was anti-Trump. Actually, he said recently that he was happy when Trump got elected, but also when um, Trump started like threatening us to invade. He changed his mind. So I guess that he probably appeals to those who were like not completely opposed to Trump, but just like feel offended from the fact that our longest ally is just being an asshole to us. So he appeals to this crowd. But it's also worth mentioning that it's a record number of voters, like the lowest number of voters since for a while, and just equates like the previous elections, but it's very low turnout. So I think that there is also some sort of how do you say it? Like people are not so invested in it. So I don't know exactly what it means for the federal level. And he's not like I cannot make any predictions about what it's gonna mean for the national election, actually. But if we're to listen to the analysts at the moment, we're not going to end up with a Pierre Poilievre, the prime minister.
All right. Ev, what's on your mind this morning?
What's on my mind? I recently penned somewhat an op-ed like piece about how Canada could prevent Musk from meddling in our elections. So this is the sort of stuff I'm thinking about: how to protect our democracies. Because I don't know if you have seen, but Canadians are grouping together to ask Justin Trudeau to revoke Elon Musk's citizenship because he is a citizen of Canada.
He's a citizen of Canada?
Yeah. So the guy was born in South Africa, realized that he wanted to move to North America, realized that his mother was born in Regina, Saskatchewan, so it would probably be an easier way to get the American citizenship. So he would like move to Canada. He worked on a farm for a little while, studied at Queen's University, and then from there used it as a levy to get to America.
How many kids in Canada did he have?
All the mothers of his child are Canadians, so he only reproduces with Canadian women.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
I didn't know either. But
wow. What is it? The Canadian women need some education on Musk, I guess. I don't know.
And more birth control.
Yes, I don't know what there's a new kid, right? The brand new kid. I don't know if the mother is Canadian, but if not, it's the first non-Canadian kid. So it can be an accident. I think that because he married other women, but he didn't have kids with them. He only had kids with Canadian women who moved.
He knows who has the best genes, and that's why it's actually a huge compliment because he really knows his eugenics, I think.
I think you're right.
I think
I
he's an
really think you're right.
so I think that's purposeful. You know, the Canadian women, maybe they're smarter and maybe they're willing to have C-sections more than American
Are they
women.
Anglo-Canadians or
Well, Grimes. Grimes's name is Claire Boucher, which is super francophone, and she studied at McGill, but I think she is Anglo-Canadian nonetheless. But like clearly, she has some of my genes, because she has some Franco in her.
yeah, that name didn't come from nowhere.
Wow, I didn't realize this Canadian connection. I think Canada's main defense, however, is being less stupid than
And
Americans,
big.
and not voting for someone who will then give him a sledgehammer and a chainsaw and let him loose inside your government. I think that's probably sufficient. But I don't know. I mean, I would revoke his American citizenship like immediately if I could.
But I have a question. So let's walk through the revoking Musk's Canadian citizenship, because among other things, we here on Dogshirt TV are a Canadian citizenship tribunal. And so let's first of all determine how Mr. Musk became a Canadian citizen. How many Canadian have petitioned for revocation of his citizenship, and what are the prospects of Elon Musk being denaturalized as a Canadian?
So he got his citizenship in 1988 or 1989. He was 17 at the time, and he asked for a passport, and he got it because his mother is born in Regina. So as a
And just to be
child,
clear, if you have one Canadian parent and you're born in South Africa, you are automatically entitled to citizenship?
yes, that's one of the cause for yeah. So he's got it totally lawfully. There's no, well, he could have lied. So the only cause for revocation of citizenship is if you lied or made a fraudulent claim of some sort.
Oh,
So
well, that should be it then. Done.
so
Oh, you
yeah.
mean on the application?
Oh yeah, yeah, on the application.
Oh, I thought you meant just generally.
No, that's it. So, but for a little while, I think between 2016 and 2017, the former Prime Minister of Canada, Stephen Harper, which was a conservative, tried to get a provision that would allow government to revoke the citizenship of dual citizen who do some kind of offenses related to terrorism and probably like treason and stuff like that. So I think it's the rationale that drives the petition, which 300,000 people have signed, more than that now. It's on its way to become the most popular petition ever submitted to the House. But so I think that's the rationale driving it. For a little period of time, Canada allowed this sort of revocation of citizenship, but as soon as Justin Trudeau got elected, he quashed this law and gave back the citizenship to those who had been victim of that new provision, because revoking citizenship for reasons that are unrelated to unlawfully obtaining it is a slippery slope. Once you start ripping apart people's passport, it can easily become like it's the biggest sanction in the arsenal of penalties you can give. It's kind of close to civil death, which was considered highly problematic, and we have a.
And it's not an issue with Elon, but it is with others. It can leave people stateless, which is a
because the provision and the whole rationale is only if you're a dual citizen.
Ah, Okay, and in his case, he's a triple citizen.
He could go to Mars. Doesn't he want to go to Mars? Just that's to me, it's like just stop talking about it. Just go to Mars. I'm fine with it, you know?
Now,
Just get on a ship and go to Mars.
there
Move
is
fast
a
and break.
the U.S. law highly disfavors denaturalization and basically also only allows it in cases of fraud, with one big exception, which is if you are a dual national and you serve in high levels of government in the other country, the US will generally require that you lose your citizenship. So, for example, I can think of two examples of this off the top of my head, one of them very ugly and one of them fine. The ugly one was Mayor Kahana, who was the very far right uh, rabbi who was eventually elected to the Knesset in Israel. He was from Brooklyn, and when he was elected to the Knesset, I think we stripped him of his U.S. citizenship on the theory that he should not be serving as a government official in at the political level in another country while holding U.S. citizenship. The other one, who's a much more attractive figure, is a friend of the show, Thomas Ilves, who, of course, first became Estonian ambassador to the United States, and that's when I think he renounced his citizenship in order to not have a conflict of interest in that role. I think the Israeli ambassador who was from Wisconsin, what's his name, who the historian did the same. But then, of course, Tomas went on to become foreign minister and then president of Estonia. And so, I think the better argument, if you wanted to strip Elon of his citizenship, is that he's functioning as the president of the United States right now, or at least one of the most senior advisors to him. Um, I think a lot of Canadians have done senior White House service, including David Frum, but I'm not sure that any have done it at the level that Elon has done it. That is cabinet participation.
I don't think any American has done it and the level of Elon has done it.
Yeah, and I think the better argument for if you were going to contemplate this would not be Elon sucks, which is what 300,000 Canadians seem to be saying, but
No,
rather,
there are he's a government official. There are some of these arguments in the petition, but still, it's not what the Citizenship Act provides for.
mhm.
So you have to
So,
change the law.
fun fact is well, now deposed, made irrelevant by civil war, former Prime Minister of Sudan, Abdullah Hamdok, he's still alive, thankfully, although he's lucky to be alive, was a dual Sudan Canadian citizen, and he served as the Prime Minister of Sudan. Also, fun fact, the former president of Somalia, Farmajo, was a dual American Somali citizen.
And
So,
why didn't the US have a problem with that? Is it just that it's,
well, it
Somalia,
probably
so
helps
who
that
cares?
Somalia is not a real government. I mean, I think we were just happy to have
A
someone,
reasonable person who we could
although he
talk
turned
to.
out to not be great.
Yeah, but he wasn't Ziad Bari.
He wasn't, but he turned out to. I mean, it's a low bar there in Somalia and Sudan for that matter. Anyway, so there's some precedent for
Somali
both.
food is really, really good.
Is it different from Ethiopian?
I think it's similar.
Yeah, I love Ethiopian. So,
All right, Holly, what's on your mind today? So we're not stripping Elon of his Canadian citizenship. We're going to come back to Ev's alternative proposal in a moment. But what's on your mind today you hugged Samantha Power yesterday.
I did. I finally made the New York Times, both print and digital. I'm in the New York Times. It's my best side, which is the back of my head. Um, Although my sign, I was wearing a two-sided, like the front said, the one you posted, USAID, Africa thanks USAID, and then the back side said, USAID American Heroes, and that it made a nice tableau for them, which is so she's hugging me, and you see the back of my head, my South Africa Mandela hat, and then you see my USAID American Heroes sign in the photo. So it made a very nice tableau. Definitely my best side, especially with a hat on. So basically, you see a sign and a hat, and I think I look spectacular. So yeah, so I guess I can check that off my list. I'm in the New York Times. I don't know. I guess I can't say I'm a New York Times writer, but I'm
But
in.
you're a
I've
New
been,
York Times model.
yeah, something like that. No, but I went down there during the Africa slot because so CIA and USAID, very different cultures, definitely keep the distance. Certainly the ops people and the USAID people keep their distance, and there's some judgment, mutual, you know, recriminations, I would say,
They
between.
think you guys are the problem and you think they're naive.
Well,
They're just
the
feeding
ops
babies
people,
when they should be overthrowing governments. Is that
the
right?
ops, the ops people, sort of but the analysts find them very wonderful colleagues because they have a lot of expertise. They have my only gripe from about USAID is they don't put a whole lot of their information in cable traffic, and so it's kind of you have to befriend officers and to find out what's really going on the ground, and there's few formal channels for communicating their really incredible expertise. In Africa they conduct it's hard for me to put this in the past tense, but I suppose it's in the past tense. They conducted the bulk of American policy on the ground in Africa because that humanitarian democracy, development, that's our entire, or was our entire policy in Africa. So they carried that out, and much more so than the foreign service officers, went outside the capital and actually had, ground level truth of what's going on, and took a lot of risks. And there's been a lot of USAID deaths over the years. So anyway, I wanted to go out and show my support to my Africa colleagues, and I did see a couple people that I know, which was bittersweet. Um, and yeah, just it was very moving. Everybody, a lot of the people out there were employees, a lot of State Department, because they work, of course, very closely. And then a lot of people who had already been dismissed and were just out there trying to show support and get their stories out. So there was a lot of press down there, and a lot of people actually were wanting to talk to the press. So that was good.
How many protesters or
There was a lot, but there's multiple entrances, so they were divided up. So we started out at the main entrance, and there was, easily 50 or so there, and then we moved around to Pennsylvania Avenue, and eventually there grew to be about 50, and then I think there was another entrance that I didn't go to. So
so I have a serious question on behalf of Lord Laser.
yeah,
Um, there's this sign that said USAID that's been taken down.
no, it's covered up.
Covered up? What's it covered up?
Well, okay, yeah, it's just been covered up by a black plastic. It's
Black,
very tacky.
black tacky plastic. How high
Yeah.
off the ground is it?
It's well above the main doors, so it's yeah, and it's not a very big area if that's what you're going for.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm thinking about. But the plastic is black. That's unfortunate because Lord Laser, if he were here at the cabin in the woods, which he is not, would observe that black tends to absorb light. Um,
But wouldn't it show up at night though? Wouldn't it
well,
show up?
yeah, it'll just be a little darker than it should. So question, you posted that you thought they were going to ban signs.
So this turned out to be not true, of course, a lot of internet rumors. A friend of mine, when I was leaving, texted me and said, "Oh, write whatever you want on your shirt because they're I have a friend down there now and they're banning signs." And I was like, I don't think they can do
Yeah,
that.
they can't do that.
But whatever. So I took my sign, but I also dressed very garishly.
So how big was the police presence?
It was just the normal building security. I will say that some of them, most of them were supportive, but there was one officer that was very hostile. And I imagine maybe early in the morning, he was maybe on a power trip and tried to take people's signs. I could see that happening because he was very rude to
Interesting.
us.
Okay, so
So anyway, signs allowed, lots of good signs. As you saw in the picture, I had a sign. And then this, of course, that was yesterday. And then over the previous night, I believe, the administration revoked 90% of all USAID contracts just like that. And Ben, and I know you guys are doing a program on lawfare about all of these. I'm just bewildered by all of the legal cases. I don't really, because I know there was a freeze on the aid cutoffs, but then I think a judge subsequently ruled that it could go forward, or Judge Roberts did.
I
And
can
then
I
I'm
can
also
I can give you the overview here, and let me if I'm going to talk about this, I'm going to disclose, of course, once again, my wife runs an organization that is very, very directly affected in a very dramatic and tragic way by this. And so I am mostly staying out of commenting on it, except to say vomit emoji. Um, but uh, the the state of play is the following. So there are two sets of litigations that affect this potentially. One is a challenge to the firings of the officials. Um, and the second is a challenge by people who are owed money or are grantees of USAID for over the freeze, and in some cases anyway, over refusal to pay for back work. The lead plaintiff is a contractor that purports to be owed $120 million for work that it's already done. So these are grantees that are affected by the freeze and have had to lay off large numbers of people, have had to curtail operations. So they went into court and they argued before Judge Ali that they were suffering irreparable harm, and he slapped a temporary restraining order on the government from a freeze. But he noted that it did not prevent the government from terminating grants in compliance with the specific terms of the specific grants. So all of these grants, for example, have, you know, regulations that say the government can terminate this if it's no longer, compliant with US policy. And so the government first turned around and basically said, we're reinstituting the freeze on grounds that all of this stuff is not compliant with US policy. And the judge then issued a ruling that said, no, 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 you can't do that. Um, you can't you can't freeze it by some other means. And he subsequently issued an order that was an order to compel the government to turn the spigot back on. The government did then two things. One is it appealed this up to the Supreme Court, and Roberts slapped a stay on the judge's order in order to give the parties time to brief it before the Supreme Court, which is happening today. Um, and the second thing the government did is it sent individual termination letters to every single one of the grantees, or 95% of them or something, that purport to be in conjunction with the terms of the individual grants. It was apparently a mail merge letter that's, like barely more. And so there are really two questions that are concurrently being litigated in this case. One is the TRO, the temporary restraining order, valid, and is the order compelling the restraining order to be complied with valid? That's before the Supreme Court, and I expect a pretty quick resolution of that. The other question is, I think, where the action is going to lie, although the Supreme Court is a, you know, don't underestimate their ability to get involved on the administration's behalf either. But the other question is, the government, and the government here, by the way, is a guy named Pete Maraca, who is the sort of shadow Secretary of State that, has punked little Marco. Little Marco is sort of the figurehead Secretary of State, but this guy, Pete Maraca, who was at January 7th and or January 6th, and is a, kind of one of these Doji. I mean, he's not part of Doge, but he's actually in my wife's old job, the head of the Finance and Budget Bureau of State. And he's functionally running everything. And so the question boils down, as best as I can tell, to if we say there's a freeze, and then you say, okay, you're not allowed to freeze everything. And so what we do instead is we send a mass email to every grantee that mail merges in, your grant number such and such is terminated because it's not in conformance with US policy, because it's a democracy promotion or DEI or, good things grant, and we now don't represent democracy promotion. DEI is terrible and we support bad things. Um, uh, can you just do a ban by a series of individual actions without an individual review, or with a farcical individual review on a mass basis? And I think that's going to be the tricky question that a lot of this is going to turn on.
So, the Bulwark, Sam Stein on the Bulwark, they had a quick take last night on just the impact. I think he was interviewing, oh, was it International Rescue? Anyway, I can't remember who was in, someone involved in the aid world, about some of these contracts and just kind of nitty gritty and on the ground. And it's just, I mean, it's just outrageous. But one of them that he mentioned, one of the contracts canceled is for that plumpy nut, a paste, or what's it? I forget the actual name, but it's that, it's that enriched peanut that they give to malnourished children. That's basically a miracle product.
It's an incredible thing.
Yeah,
And,
it's
you can be shockingly near death, and
yeah,
there's very high protein. Uh,
with lots of nutrients and yeah. And it's basically it can preclude hospitalization even. So it's portable. It doesn't need refrigeration. I mean, it's just ideal for Africa in particular. Anyway, and it's an American company. It's made with American peanuts in America. And yeah, so that is a contract that was revoked. And, hopefully there's another,
yeah.
Laura Donna says it's actually a French company.
Well, the point
Maybe
is
there's more
kill
than one.
African kids by fucking American peanut farmers,
Yeah,
whether
I
it's
know
a
it's
French
peanut. I
company
know
or
it's
a.
American peanut farmer. But anyway, so that's one. And then then he talked about Darfur, which really broke my heart, because I know just getting the humanitarian access into Darfur has been a, you know, more than year-long process that USAID has, and the US in general, but obviously USAID on the forefront of that, has just doggedly pursued in every, policy meeting. What they've always, that's always what the laser focus on, they've been laser focused on. And it has improved since around August. There's been more aid that has been able to get into Darfur. And of course, a lot of that is US aid. And so thinking about Darfur, and then of course, he talked about these humanitarian waivers being kind of bullshit, um,
Well,
few and far
they're
between.
they're not bullshit. But they're not being complied with
Well, that's what
either.
I mean. Yeah,
And
they're not bullshit, but they're not being complied
and
with. And there's
again,
been a lot of
this
far.
reflects the who is the Secretary of State question, right? So this is, you know, a I mean, it's really, for a group of people who purport to stand for a unitary executive, it really couldn't be more offensive. The Secretary of State, who is the Senate confirmed official responsible, has issued waivers. And some non-Senate confirmed official, I have great respect for the position of the head of what's called F, which my wife was the head of F. Um, uh, I have no disrespect for that position. It's not the Secretary of State. And if you had asked any previous head of F, I think I can confidently speak for all of them on this, and said, do you get to countermand a decision by the Secretary of State? They would have said, what are you joking? I work for the Secretary of State, right? But Pete Maraca decides that, Rubio says PEPFAR is staying open, as the cactus might say, F that. I'm not turning on the money for PEPFAR, or Plumpy Nut, or and you do have this. I guess the generous way to describe it uh, would be to call it chaotic. But there's another way to think about it, which is that there's a deep state that is countermanding the uh, uh, orders and directions of the senior elected leadership and the people who are appointed by the president to and confirmed by the Senate to run the State Department. And I have no love in my heart for Marco Rubio. May a ship come in bearing gold in his name and it not be enough to pay his medical expenses. But he did issue this order, these waivers, and they're simply not being followed.
Go ahead.
No, I don't. I was
No,
just. I mean, I just on the ground too. The chaos has redounded to just, people are not, the funds are not being released, the contracts are not being, honored. I mean, to me, there's like, I think you mentioned, there's contracts that are not being honored for work already done. There's all kinds of, to me, like egregious legal lawsuits that could be done here.
Yeah, but this is actually a big part of the problem. So the traditional way that would be handled, right? Holly and Ev Inc. is a government contractor based, somewhere out in Reston or something, that you get off the Dulles Access Road to go to in one of those buildings. And they have a big contract with the government, and the government decides not to pay them. The traditional way you deal with that is that Holly and Ev Inc. file a suit in the U.S. Court of Federal Claims, and it takes 5 years to litigate it. And if you win, you get your money, right? And maybe you get interest on your money, so you're made whole. So that works really well if there's an individual claimant. But here the problem is that there are thousands of claimants. And by the way, the core issue is not the making whole of people or companies. The core issue is the programmatic activity of a US federal agency, right? And whether Congress actually gets to appropriate money to things like AIDS prevention in Africa or democracy promotion anywhere. And so there's an urgency to it that the normal claims process doesn't serve. And I think there's a real risk here that the courts will say, what's the problem? We have a court of federal claims. You think, Mr. Beltway Bandit, that you're not getting paid. We're sympathetic. It sure seems like you've got a righteous claim, but go to the court of federal claims and make it, and then go through the court of special appeals, and then the court of and then to the Supreme Court. What are you doing looking for an injunction, right? And you've already seen that play out in some of the employment cases where the courts have said this, go through the Merit Systems Protection Board, go through the normal process. The normal process is fine if, I'm a civil servant who got fired because my boss hit on me and I wouldn't sleep with her or him or whatever. And then I got fired, right? That's what that process is. It's not if you fire 10,000 people, right? And so figuring out how to get, how to not break these cases up into 10,000 constituent components and litigate them in the normal course, but treat it as an assault on the institution and the institutions that has to be dealt with in a prospective and preventative fashion is part of the challenge of this period of the litigation.
Yeah, several questions, but often you're saying that in Trump 1.0, the travel ban got really the stuff like the travel ban got really less bad thanks to the courts, because they were incompetent. Like the Trump administration was not good at writing their bills and stuff. It seems that things are different now.
We don't know. I mean, the things are, remember, we're 1 month in. The travel ban got better over 2 years, right? And we've had a lot of temporary injunctions and a lot of TROs. They're litigating them. What the extent of mitigation is measured over time, not measured, it's not an instant thing. And so, ask me in 6 months and then ask me in 18 months. And then, that's a complicated question that you can't ask at the TRO stage. You can only ask after you see, okay, does the Supreme Court leave this or motion to compel in order to compel in place? If it does, that's going to make a lot of things better. If it doesn't, well, we have to see what it does, right? And so I think it's too early to tell that. So I want to get back to Ev's Elon Musk alternative proposal for Canada, but
we have Richard.
But Richard first.
Hello. So I'm just curious about the effect on the local economy in the Beltway. I guess you have a lot. You have a lot of people who are out of work. You have a lot of people out of work who have bills that they are not going to be able to pay. You have a lot of people who depend on those people who are out of work, who are in a tight place. What's going on? I don't hear any reporting about this, but I'm sure that Ben and Holly, you know what's going on there.
Well,
No, go ahead, Holly.
well, I mean, so first of all, I think there's a delay in terms of economic impact on this area because people are still being paid right now. They're on admin leave or they have some sort of severance pay. But one of the ladies down at USAID yesterday reminded me that this government shutdown, the looming government shutdown, would actually cut off, at least Ben, and you can chime in here because I don't know if this is correct, but she seemed to think she was on admin leave, and she thought that her pay would be cut off during a shutdown because obviously if you're on admin leave, you're not an essential employee. So that is a looming issue for sure, as well. And but yeah, I think there around here, I think there will be an economic impact. I don't know, our job market here can absorb the numbers of people that and they all have, similar expertise, et cetera, et cetera. Meanwhile, there's government contractors are wary as well, depending on what their contracts are. They probably don't want to hire more people either. So I think regionally, here and elsewhere, there's going to be an economic impact. I want to say that in Africa, in some countries, Malawi being one, which we talked to my friend Beth, was last week. Malawi, 13% of their budget is aid, and a lot of that is USAID. So, and then South Sudan is another country where, I mean, the majority, or a very large portion of their entire economy is the aid industry. So now, granted, the standard of living is so low, people are on a subsistence basis, which does create resiliency in their economic systems. But, in some of these countries, it'll have an enormous economic impact beyond the humanitarian impact.
I would say on the local level, the impact is going to be significant. It will also be highly sectoral. Um, you know, a tornado has hit the development community. If you're working in that community, you are today thinking about a career change or graduate school, depending on how old you are, or if you're a young lawyer, it is not that bad, but it's pretty bad. A huge number of people are coming out of the government, out of the Justice Department, and these are very elite lawyers, and they're having trouble finding work. Um, now, is it as bad as the aid community? No. And is the absorptive capacity of big law big enough that over a year these people are going to be okay? Yeah. Are these people who expected to have trouble finding jobs in the first place? Absolutely not. So I think it's, and then, it's not just local. It's everywhere the National Park Service is, right? It's everywhere. And so I think one of the, if you combine it with tariffs, if you combine it with the other destabilizing aspects of the administration's policies, you can really pose the question, why do they think this is going to be good for them politically? And you could really imagine shaving 1.5, 2 points off of GDP in the next year. And then, by the way, since we have Ev here and she controls all Canadian oil, I would just point out that the entire US Midwest is dependent on Canadian oil. And, at some point, there is a suicide pact quality to the tariff discussion. And if you fuck with Canada too much, they may just decide to sell that oil to somebody else, and that's wrenching for Canada. But it's $7 oil prices in the Midwest. Gas prices would not be appreciated either. And so I'm not, which is, by the way, I think why Trump really backed down on the first round of tariffs. And so I don't understand why they think this is going to work for them, but I am not confident in any event that they're right if they do. All right, before we wrap up, Ev, so you're not going to strip Elon Musk of his Canadian citizenship. What should Justin Trudeau do about Elon Musk?
Oh, well, quickly because we're out of time, but like it should enforce the rules that we already have in terms of elections. Like the law that governs our elections already provides tons of options to like prevent them from funding our like funding and using Twitter to influence our elections, and we should just use the laws that we already have. They are not as sexy, of course. It's a boring law, very technical, but it does what it should do. And the guy doesn't need more attention. We don't need to engage in the citizenship war in addition to the tariff war. Just like prevent him from funding a single dime on our elections.
There we go. Folks, we're going to be back on Monday. I know a weekend is a long time to be away from the cactus. I know a weekend, it makes your heart hurt to think that you're going to wake up tomorrow morning and you're going to be like, there's no Dog Shirt TV. And I have a suggestion for you, which is there's some back episode that you missed. And at 8 o'clock tomorrow, if you play that back episode, you will hear my dulcet tones say, and we're live. And you'll hear me say that it's 8 o'clock, and you'll just have to ignore the fact that the date is wrong. But that's okay, because sometimes I get the date wrong anyway. And so you can just imagine that it's one of those days. And you can imagine that the people in the YouTube chat are John Hawkinson and Laura Donna. And, instead of some like crazy big balls person. And you can have an experience that is almost the same, but not quite the same. It's like an archive episode. And if you are one of those people who's watching this on YouTube, understand that you could be here having the real thing. All you need to do is become a actual full subscriber of Dog Shirt TV. And if you are one of the people who subscribes to Dog Shirt Daily, but isn't a paid subscriber, let me tell you about all the benefits you get by being a paid subscriber. You get to participate in the chat with John Hawkinson and Laura Donna. You get the psychic benefit of knowing that you are supporting special military operations against Russian diplomatic targets citywide and worldwide, and maybe coming up soon against the former USAID sign if the black plastic doesn't absorb it all. You get to read E.J. Wittes's account of the Dan Bongino podcast. And I want to tell you, it's so good. Folks, we'll see you on Monday.